Hello and welcome to or welcome back to another episode of Incited. I'm Haley and I'm the host of this podcast. And this episode is almost hypocritical because it's about how much I hate the term passion project. But this whole podcast was started because I wanted to interview students about their quote unquote passion projects. And looking back on that now, I think I had a great idea. And I think a lot of people who start projects with the idea that they are passion projects have good ideas. But I think the whole passion project archetype, especially nowadays with this great pressure to be extraordinary and to start the next crazy, huge six-figure business when you're in high school, just kind of throws away a lot of the fun and the passion part out of passion projects. And before I get into this whole episode of, why the passion project archetype is messed up and how to actually pursue your dreams and, be happy and still accomplish things without burning out quickly. Before I get into all of that, I really encourage you to follow this podcast, subscribe to this podcast, whatever you're able to do on your podcast platform. In addition to also, checking out my website, insightedpodcast.com, and my Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, although I don't really use TikTok. TBD if I'm going to bring that back because I deleted it a while ago. But that's all at Incited Podcast, which is INSIGHTED podcast. So please check that out. Follow me on this journey because if you've been here for a while or if you've been able to gather anything from my social media and my episode list, I have rethemed this podcast so many times. But this, I know, oh my God, not to sound cliche, I feel it in my bones. That this is the one because I am so genuinely not to be a hypocrite, but passionate about, productivity and just helping students pursue what they want to pursue without, burning out and while still managing their school and work and personal lives. So if you're interested in that, or if you just want to be able to say that you're an OG when I'm super famous and on red carpets and stuff, then I encourage you to subscribe and follow me and stick along for the journey. But yeah, without any further ado, let's get into it. I'm not even going to look up the dictionary definition of passion project for this episode because I don't think that it's necessarily relevant. I mean, there might be an Urban Dictionary definition for it, but since passion project has nothing to do with sex or drugs, I don't really think so. But to my knowledge, passion project started out as a venture or some sort of thing that you were working on for yourself that represented your own interests. So it could be a book or something, or I'm thinking of Tick Tick Boom, Jonathan Larson working on his first musical, something that really matters to you that you don't necessarily, I mean, you care about the outcome of it, but the idea isn't necessarily to have this, super successful business or a New York Times bestseller. It's just more of getting your own ideas and your own, passions out there. But recently with, I'd say this whole emphasis on, college admissions and being better than other people and just really standing out, the idea of a passion project is something that sets you apart. And in a way, a true passion project will set you apart from the crowd. After all, not everyone shares your passion, and actually very few people, if anyone, will really share the same passion and motivation that you might have for starting your own venture. But I think more than anything now, at least within a college admissions kind of scope of it, having a passion project is something an outside venture that you do that in theory would have great results. And I think this emphasis on results with new passion projects is definitely the downfall of it. Because if you go on any sort of not just those videos that's how to get into Harvard for dummies, but just talking to anyone nowadays, especially people who have been through the college admissions process, it's kind of a prerequisite for somebody to have super high GPA and test scores and just be a great student all around. But since there's so many, thousands of kids like that, what are you going to do that really sets you apart from the crowd? And of course, the natural answer nowadays is have some sort of passion project. But in saying that, you contradict what a passion project is in of its essence, which is something that you really care about. And instead, you're turning it into this extra perk, this extra thing to bolster some sort of application or to bolster you as a candidate for something. And that just goes against the idea of what a passion project is, which is something to truly express yourself. And I feel like a passion project should not be a prerequisite for anything. But unfortunately, as a high schooler in the Bay Area, which, if you didn't know, it's very competitive when it comes to getting into college and higher education here, the idea of starting a passion project or something just for the means of getting into a good college, and I think that that's just messed up, that something like a passion project that's supposed to stand for who you are is instead something that is turning into, just a little application booster that sets you apart from other candidates. And because of this, what you get is you get lots of, at least at my school clubs and stuff that just disappear when people graduate, or at a larger scale level, community organizations that put on stuff like food drives and coat drives that help the community, that as soon as whoever runs them graduates, they're gone and the community loses that resource. So I think that in the grand scheme of things, some other kid's probably going to put on a food drive and some other kid's going to start a new club at school. But I just think that the whole idea of a passion project is losing its meaning, and that, when you're making your own endeavor, whether you're writing a book, whether you're starting a business, there's now this pressure for it to succeed, or else you're going to be seen as, a failure. And when I was little, I read a lot of those Who Was books. So I know that, Microsoft and Apple, because the Steve Jobs book, I read it 10 times. Um, but big companies like that, they failed at first. And I think the idea of failure is sort of becoming this dirty word. And, even me with my podcast, I have definitely failed so many times. If you look back at the dates that these were uploaded, or these episodes were uploaded, sorry, you'll see huge gaps of like months. And I think I got to a year at one point. And, that was all small failures. But I think, obviously you hear this so many times, but if you don't fail, you don't succeed. But I think, actions speak louder than words. And in a sense, what we're seeing nowadays is because of this whole pressure to have some sort of passion project that can bolster your applications, the idea of failure is basically off the charts. Because if you are starting a business or a nonprofit or writing a book just to get into college, you have 4 years to do it unless you start in middle school like a freaking tryhard, which I don't think many people are doing unless they're like really, really locked in. But it just erases the idea that, you can fail and still succeed in the end, which I just think is messed up. And at least as of right now, I have never heard of somebody starting a business or a nonprofit or some sort of venture, writing a book or something just to get into college, and then, them finding success and solace beyond like the material value. Like that rarely ever, if ever, happens. I don't think I've personally ever heard of it happening. But instead, I think that there's still so much value in pursuing what you want without, the worries of other people, like, judging you, or all of it going to waste. Because I truly think that if you're starting a venture, if you're starting a business and you sell like one thing or zero things, you are still learning a lot. And I think that, rarely ever do you see someone succeed in life doing something that they don't really care about, unless they're like working for someone else. Or no, okay, let me rephrase that. You rarely ever see somebody like starting something and succeeding with it if they don't really care about it. You can step into some sort of job that you don't really care about, that you don't like, and you can have monetary success, but you will never have emotional and monetary success when starting your own venture unless it is something that you care about. So I instead want to bring up, how to instead pursue what makes you happy, sort of along the original definition of a passion project, something that you really care about, bringing it back to Tick, Tick, Boom with Jonathan Larson. Talking about something, a venture that, whether it succeeds or fails, you will have achieved some sort of emotional success because you got that idea out into the world. It is of my, I think, utmost belief that if you are starting a true passion project that comes, okay, not to be cliche, but that comes from the heart, that comes for something that you really want to do, you don't start out by brainstorming, okay, what do I want to do? like with the idea and intent of starting something that will succeed. You want to take something that you already have that you love. Like personally, if I didn't have this podcast, I'd probably be starting a YouTube channel because I remember I used to grow up like, okay, this is a whole little tangent. It's going to be like 30 seconds, I promise. Then I'll get back to like the actual educational part. But just as a little bit of a yap, I like in 2016, I'd watch all those like lifestyle vlogs, and I very rarely would see people who looked and acted like me. Because, for reference, I tend to dress a little bit more on the masculine side. I don't know, I kind of like flip-flop. And then I'm also Black. So I very rarely would see anyone who wasn't like a preppy, like girly looking white girl making these like lifestyle videos, which absolutely there's nothing wrong with that. But at least for me, I almost kind of felt sad, as like a little kid, not being able to see myself in these videos that, really piqued my interest. So if I weren't doing this podcast, I would probably be making vlogs, as myself, as a queer woman of color, so other people could maybe see themselves in the whole YouTube lifestyle space, which, maybe once I have time, I might start making videos. But as of right now, like I'm already slammed with like this podcast and homework and everything and studying for the SAT. But I don't know. But I think the first step, just to get rid of that whole tangent, is really taking something that matters to you, that not with the intent of like, oh, I want to start something, but with the intent of, oh, here's whether it's a problem that you recognize or whether it's a solution, honestly. Like, I feel like, I mean, there's obviously a lot of problems within the book industry, for example. But if you really want to write a book and you've just been thinking for a while, wow, I really want to write a book, I've got this idea, like, go for it. I think you want to be taking these ideas from the back of your mind that maybe you dreamt about, which that sounds so cliche, but really, like, whether you're sitting in class and you're just like kind of dozing off, or whether, before you go to bed, what are you thinking about that makes you happy? And if you don't know something, that is okay. In fact, I encourage you to, whether it's a notebook or a post-it note, or whether it's your notes app on your phone, start writing down those like little ideas you have for like, a dream business, or what you'd be doing if you weren't currently in school, or if you didn't currently have like soccer or something going on. Because once you write those down, you'll know when you come across the idea. I don't really know how to describe the feeling, but it'll feel right. Like it'll feel like something, this is what I should be doing. And, that's how I felt when I really rethemed this podcast to productivity. Because when I first had my original ideas for it, I was excited. Like, I knew I wanted to make a podcast because, I mean, look at me now. I have basically no notes besides what I want the title for this episode to be. And I've re-recorded it a fair amount of times. But I'm just going in with what I care about and what I like to talk about. But it was not like that for the first two iterations of this podcast. I was having to put together so many notes because I love, podcasting. I love to yap, and I love the whole media, like, or not media, medium of a podcast, because I like video editing, but, just getting myself ready to be on camera for that long and just editing video introduces so much more that I need to worry about. I like the whole format of a podcast. I knew that part was right, but I didn't think that what I was putting together was right. And I think for you, so I'm not just talking about myself here, keeping those ideas of what matters to you, what you would be doing if you weren't necessarily, in this life, or if you had a second shot. That is where you're really going to find those ideas for, your passion project. And that sort of brings me into the next idea, because if you're thinking about what you'd be doing if, you weren't a student, or if you didn't have sports and, the rest of your life going on, that probably means that you might not have time to start up what you want to start up. Like, for instance, back to my podcast again. I took so much time off of my podcast because I was having like a lot of trouble like academically, and I was struggling mental health wise, which I know kind of goes against my whole like, oh, I'm this reimagined productivity person. Yeah, because I was too busy reimagining myself and getting productive with everything. I was figuring out what worked for me homework wise. How can I get back the time to be doing stuff that I care about? And, after the last few months, yes, I have time to be recording this podcast that I want to be doing. And I think that it's really important to not overload yourself. So, yes, you may have this great idea and you're like, I want to start this. When can I start this business? When can I write this book? When can I produce this album? I really don't know what you're up to, but you're going to have this idea like, when can I start? And it's really important to look at your schedule and make sure that you don't burn out this idea. And the word burnout is like used so much. It's like a buzzword at this point. But when I think of burnout, I think of a candle because I think that, if you light the candle and, there's too much wind going on, and think of like the wind as like the other stuff around. And I know that this is like a crazy metaphor. Stick with me though. If there's too much going on, the candle will burn out. And if you know anything about candles, the first time you light a candle, that like sets the candle. So if you light it and it's only like burned a little bit, like guess what? Every other time that you're burning it, it's going to burn in like that shape and that pattern. So you want to make sure that you are in like a good time, a good space where you have the energy to work on this. Now, this is sort of another point that I guess contradicts that, but it's also good to keep in mind. There is no better time to start than like when you're ready. There's always going to be a reason to put off starting that YouTube channel or like starting that business, starting that blog. Do people even use blogs anymore? I don't know. I guess there's like Substack, which I don't know. Whatever you're starting, there's always a reason to put it off. But I also think that within those reasons to put it off, there's no better time to start them when you're ready. Because people say that there's no better time to start than now. I don't think that's true because now you could have a lot going on. I've definitely had times where like I just got out of my color guard season and that was 14 hours or more per week. Plus I had volunteering and plus I had a lot of school and I was preparing for the SAT, which I have to prepare for again because I did not do well. And that would not have been the best time to start up my podcast or to start up any other venture. So I think that you really need to analyze, why am I putting this off? Am I putting this off because I don't have the mental capacity, or am I procrastinating? Am I scared? Because chances are, yeah, you're going to be scared. And the first time that you start something, you may think that this is the right time to start it. And guess what? You might crash and burn and fall. But the good thing is that even though, I mentioned the whole thing about candles, which is true, by the way, first time you burn a candle, it's always going to burn in that pattern. The candle still works. All you'll have learned is what doesn't work. So, okay, I've yapped for a while. Here's a little TLDR. The best time to start something isn't always now. I think that you need to, step back, think about, is this really the best time for me to start this venture? Because if you don't have the mental capacity, if you don't have the physical capacity, like the physical time, it's not going to work out. So you want to take a step back and think, do I really have the capacity? And if you don't think that you do, are you being truthful with yourself or are you just procrastinating? Are you just putting this off? So once you've identified that great, perfect time to really start something, that's where you just go for it. There's so many other videos and resources online on, how to start your business, how to write your book, how to start your passion project that include stuff about, researching and setting up a website if you need to do that, all of that stuff. But I think the real important thing to know that I can tell you that those videos might not is obviously that you're going to fail, which, yeah, they will tell you that. But when you fail, you don't immediately need to get back up again, which, oh my God, this goes against like anything that other people will say. But I think that when people talk about getting back up again, the definition of insanity, which I don't know if this is the dictionary one, but it's the one that my mom always told me growing up, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So yeah, when you get down or if you fail, which yeah, you probably will, because if you're going to succeed, you do need to fail. When you fail, you need to take a second to reflect. Why did you fail? And don't go doing the exact same thing expecting different results, or else you're going to be insane. So what I like to do, and what I did for my podcast so many times, is I took a step back and I'm like, why am I not enjoying what I'm doing? Why am I not getting these episodes out? And for me personally, it was because I did not like what I was creating. And so from there, I didn't just go back and try and create the same thing over again. I decided, what is something that I could change? And I started by, changing the questions I asked, or even changing the whole theming of my podcast a few times. But each time that I quote unquote failed or had something go not my way, I took a step back and I reflected before I got back into it. And you can take as much time with this as you want. And I do think, as I was saying before, there's this pressure to succeed immediately when people are creating some sort of passion project solely for their college application. So you don't need to be stuck under that time constraint. And even if you are applying to college and are hoping to, stick this on your little Common App activities list, you can absolutely say, oh, I started whatever business, and obviously it looks really cool if you can have like some statistics and some impact. But even if you don't, wherever you end up going, okay, this is kind of getting more into like the philosophical collegey range, but whatever you do for education, wherever you go, or if you choose to not go to a 4-year college, you can still absolutely succeed and really get wherever you want. Because there's people who go to 4-year colleges, there's people who go to Harvard and who end up unemployed after, and then there's people who go and are like billionaires. So it's really up to you. And even if, this passion project isn't done in the time for you to be able to get into the school that you want to do, make the most of what you have, and you can still find success no matter where you go to college. Because at least where I live, like in the Bay Area, there's a lot of billionaires, and you know what? A lot of them did go to Stanford. A lot of them went to MIT and Harvard. But you know what? A lot of them went to random colleges that I've never, ever heard of. Or they went to like a random college for their undergrad and went somewhere super cool for their grad school. Or they didn't go to college and they pursued other methods of investing and getting that material and emotional success for them and their family. So it really goes to show that your end goal shouldn't just be getting into a school. Because when you make that your end goal, you don't really give yourself room to grow, because schools are all about learning. And I could go on, and I'm probably going to make a whole other video about this. But to sort of circle back to the whole passion project discussion, don't feel stuck on one particular timeline. And it is true that if you're doing some things, like I try and upload every 2 weeks, and getting off of that, like, that does have some repercussions. Like, I do want to grow my podcast. I do want to have a wide listener base. It's hard to do that when I don't have consistent uploads. So there might be some sort of time constraint. But at the end of the day, it's not going to matter if, you miss an upload or two, you like miss a day. The only time it does matter is if you need to like fulfill an order for a business or something. Or if you promise to donate something to a homeless shelter. Like, obviously then follow through. But in most cases, excluding the outliers, if you take a break, if you step away, it's not going to have this crazy adverse effect. So I think it's important to take the time that you need to reflect. Or if honestly you just need to step away from your venture, absolutely go for it. Because at the end of the day, your end goal should not be having this crazy successful venture that makes you into the next Elon Musk, which I hope you wouldn't want to be Elon Musk, but that's a whole political discussion. I don't want to get into that. But you shouldn't want to be this, next billionaire or the next like superstar as your main goal. It's okay to have that as like a side goal. Obviously, I want to grow this podcast. I'd love to be, on those like top Apple Podcast charts, but that is not my main goal. And if that is your main goal, then maybe consider looking at other ventures, because there are ways to, fast track that monetary success, but it's not always going to be within a passion project, which usually falls somewhere within the arts for a lot of people. But I think that it's really important to kind of, remind yourself of that goal and that it's for you. So at the end of the day, if you need to take a couple days, or if you need to take a month or even a year away from your venture, make that okay with yourself. And this sounds so basic, but it's something that I don't see ever talked about online. And I think that this is the number one way to induce success, even if it's not monetary, because as I've been saying for the past like 30 minutes, emotional success should be your number one if this is truly a passion project. And if it's not, then great. You know what? Keep up with your venture, but then it doesn't fall into the category of what a passion project should be. And I encourage you to look at just one of the many other, business starting, book writing, all of that stuff, like tutorials online. And I'm sure that they can give you different advice than I'm giving you now. But if you are doing this purely for your emotional success, and of course you do want monetary success to go with that. But if your main goal is emotional success and to really pursue your dream or pursue that idea that's been at the back of your mind, you need to step away from this idea that it's like success or bust. Because, yeah, open a little Who Was book that was written for elementary schoolers, and you will hear all about these entrepreneurs and these athletes and just other like really amazing people who only succeeded because they took a step back or they failed at one point. And I think that is where you get true success. And with emotional success, often, you know what? Will come monetary success, will come fame. But I think the number one box to check, which I hate saying box to check because it's different for everyone. But with that being said, the number one box to check is that you are happy with what you're doing. And I think that, you try something out, doesn't work, you reflect on it, and, you get back to it. That's where you're going to find the real success. And that's how you start a true passion project. And with that, I am going to end this episode. So if you enjoyed this episode, or if you didn't, I think I have comments on Spotify, but if I don't, I also have an Instagram, which is at Incited Podcast, and same handle as my website and my TikTok and my threads. I don't really post on TikTok, so let me know if you want to see that. But if you got some feedback, whether it's positive or negative, try and keep it like respectful. But yeah, my DMs are open on Instagram, but that's all Incited Podcast, INSIGHTD Podcast, incitedpodcast.com too. I encourage you to follow me obviously across all of those platforms, and then also subscribe to me on whatever podcast platform that you're listening on. I encourage you to stick along for the ride. And yeah, as I said before, if you got some feedback from me, positive or negative, leave it in my DMs and I'll be happy to oblige. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I think I'm going to get some water because I'm really out of breath for like straight rapid fire yapping for the past 30 minutes. So thank you so much for following me throughout this episode, and I will see you soon. Bye.